Hey, this is Matt, and I just wanted to do a video about how I make music in Korg Gadget. In the last year or so, I have made over 100 tracks, and most of them are made on my phone in the car on my lunch break while I'm at work. I'll spend about 50 minutes usually working on a track. This is all from scratch. Sometimes just coming up with the name can actually take me 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how brain dead I feel in the middle of the day. I usually try to name it just to kind of give it a vibe. Anyhow, I'm gonna hop into Korg Gadget directly in a second, but I just wanted to give a little intro. I use, to make the whole thing easier, I use this little Korg Bluetooth keyboard, the Micro Key Air. I'll go over pairing it, it's super easy. And I actually usually just use regular earbuds that come with an iPhone. I'm doing this on an iPhone, by the way. Mainly because I think coming up with this stuff on kind of crappier earphones, it works better in the long run. If you can hear the frequencies of each sound that you're working on earbuds, then most likely when you have better earphones or speakers that have better, frequency representation, you will find that it sounds pretty good right out the gate, even without any real mixing. I don't do a lot of mixing in Gadget during this phase. This is really just to get the ideas out. What I do on a given day really varies, depends on my mood, what I'm interested in doing. Sometimes it's very beat focused, sometimes it's more synth driven. I don't know what I'll feel like today, but we'll figure that out in a second, I guess. Anyhow, also working on, just real quick, working on the regular little earbuds. Kind of, the volume is lower. And so anybody that works on music and has done any sort of mixing, or if you just are working on music and listening to something repetitiously to, to come up with ideas for different sections or whatever, it's actually kind of better to listen to stuff at a lower volume, so that it prevents ear fatigue, basically. If you listen to something over and over at a higher volume, your ears get tired essentially, and you may not hear things as well, because whether you're aware of it or not, your consciousness is kind of like getting bored, I guess. I don't know. I just find that it works pretty well using these. I also have, if you compare with your car, or I have a little audio cable that goes into my car, you can actually listen to it that way too. It's not a bad way to necessarily mix, because you're hearing it the way it would sound in a vehicle on speakers, like in someone's car. Anyhow, I'm gonna hop over to Gadget and we'll go into more detail. All right, so here's Korg Gadget. You probably saw me create a new session, which I did with that little paper icon, and then I hit new, sorry. It auto suggests a name. I never use those, but some of them are funny. Also, the first thing I did was added a Zurich, which is an audio recorder, because that's the only way for me to do a screen capture video while you're able to hear it. So at times when I'm working, this will actually go away. All right, so first thing to do is we'll go ahead and pair my Bluetooth keyboard. There's two ways to do it. when I turn it on here in a second, you should see a little thing pop up in the top right corner. You can hit that and it will pair. But if you're in another screen, sometimes you won't see that. So we'll go over that, how to pair it otherwise in a second. So you can see I just turned it on, and if I hit that, it connects. Or it takes you to the screen to connect, sorry. And then you just hit connect. And there you go. But that same place can be reached by hitting the gear icon, and you can see under Bluetooth MIDI. There, same thing. All right, so Gadget, there's a free version and there's a paid version. It costs like $19.99, I think, new, unless there's sales. It comes with a bunch of instruments right out the gate. I believe all of these, not the Montpellier, but all the rest of these. I don't think the Bilbao is free. The Abu Dhabi is not free. I don't think the Vancouver's free. Anyhow, there's a bunch. I haven't bought all these, but there's a bunch of instruments you can buy. But basically, all the way down to here, I have all these instruments. And the cool thing with Gadget is that you can create any number of these, like any number of instances, essentially. I mean, I haven't like tested that. I haven't made like 100 drum machines. I don't know. Probably is like a computer, you know, if you tax your resources, it's not going to work well. But I mean, I get some pretty complex tracks going with at least, 12 instruments. Sometimes multiple instances of the same instrument, because you can do very different things with different presets and different settings. A lot of time I'll start with a beat. Sometimes I just start with synth. But usually, if you're going to make any sort of beat-oriented music, it's good to have a beat kind of as a metronome, even if you're going to change it later. So, I'll start with I use the Recife a lot here. There's also the London down here, which is a drum machine. That one's more, it's a little more limited. The Recife has more, you can have more drum sounds in one screen. The Bilbao is a sample player. You can make beats with that, but you can also make just like manipulated samples and melodies. And the Abu Dhabi can also be used to make beats, but it's more of a loop slicer, so you can bring a sample in and chop it up and do weird stuff to it. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the Recife. All right, so you see it created a second track here. Just to go through this, you see it says 1 and it's a scene there. So when I hit play, that's one loop. It played through it. Now, as I go through a song, I'll be creating more scenes, and we'll go through that in a second. But basically, everything on scene 1, if I had more instruments here, when I hit play, it plays all of them, and it plays it for however long the loop is. And we'll go over that too, but to choose how long or how many times it loops, essentially, you can hit the function key here, and in the top left, you'll see it says 4 times 1. If you hit that, you can actually choose how many times it repeats. And that will vary, because once we go into I'm going to click on track 2 here. I can't record, by the way, when I go into an instrument, so I may have to kind of pre-explain things, but when I hit the track 2, it took me into basically the MIDI layout for the instrument that I chose, which was the Recife. That's where you can draw your beats or record your beats, but you'll see it basically in a drum roll, I guess, style. GUI looking thing. I don't know what to call it, but and within that screen, you can choose how many bars there are, basically. And so that how many bars there are comes into play with what I was just explaining, which is, you know, how many times you want it to repeat. Because if you've got like a long bar, you may not want it to repeat twice. Because if it's like, let's say it's a 16 bar length, doubling that is 32, and that's going to be really long. So I usually only, you know, if it's a short one, you might want to make, you know, this be repeat 4 times, but usually it's only going to be like 2, because I'll do like an 8 bar length, something like that. Anyhow, I'm going to go in and start to work on the beat. So just to explain what I was doing, since the keyboard is paired, at least on my keyboard, I have to go down 1 octave, and then the samples that you see within the Recife start on the far left key and go more than halfway through the keyboard, because the Recife has, I don't know how many samples total, but you know, at least 12 or more. They can each be individually modified, and yeah, so I'm gonna, as you saw, I chose a kit. There's a lot of, what I usually do to make stuff is I will choose a preset or an existing kit, but I almost always modify my sounds at least a little bit, so that I don't just use some out the box, you know, existing thing that someone else created. I usually try to at least put a little of my own flair on it. So I'm going to go back in there and I'm going to make a little beat real quick. I usually start like simple so that I have like kind of a metronome, which you'll see me also arm the metronome, the actual metronome, to start creating the beat. So that's what's going to happen there. And I'll set the tempo. All right, so that took longer than I wanted it to, but you could see that I adjusted some of the sounds. You know, mostly just a little pitching and leveling, but I do weird stuff other than that sometimes too. I'm just trying to keep it simple. I also changed the overall, you can do an effects send to the kit that's part of it. You can apply other effects out here in this screen by going to this little iFX button here. And there's a few things you can choose from. And I use those often too. But within the actual kit, you can only do one effect at a time as a master send. So I changed it to distortion so that I could make the drums a little bit, more distorted. I don't always do that, but it makes them pretty punchy. Anyhow, I recorded that little loop, so that'll operate as my metronome now, so that I can, I'll probably add a synth now and start creating some sounds that way. So let's see. I use the Wolfsburg a lot. The Chicago is a lot of fun. It's good for making bass lines, but also arpeggios. It's got an built-in arpeggiator. The Phoenix is good. Miami's decent for bass sounds, but it's definitely kind of dubstep centric. The Marseille is good for some more synthy stuff. Really all this stuff is good, just depends on what you're going for. A lot of them are similar but have different controls. So I guess I'm just going to start with this. Alright, I'm going to go into the synth track now and start to create a melody. By the way, if you saw what I just did there, in the top right corner of any instrument screen, you'll see a little plus button. That, if you hit plus, it will create another bar. So it starts off with one bar, and then you can add, I think up to, I don't know how many total, but I know you can go at least up to 16. In fact, I usually don't even need to go that far, because I mean, you're looping this stuff, so you're going to just create a whole new scene for the next movement, if you will, or the next section of the song. Different people can work different ways. Also, by the way, if you turn this program sideways, you can get different screen options here. If you need more real estate, especially when you're looking at the devices, like I'll go into the Zurich here, that's the one I'm recording on. You can see this a lot bigger than if it's like this. I have no idea how that's going to come out on the video, but hopefully you'll get the idea. All right, and that up in the top corner next to the gear here, you see that up and down arrow. That's how I you can move the mixer basically up and down. By the way, I always usually add, this is another add-on that I paid for, but if you hit this little thing here, you can turn a limiter on, that's free, but this Deemax, it's like a maximizer or something. I usually bring it up to like about 22, 23, somewhere in there. It depends on what you're working on. It has other modes and stuff. I usually just use the bass mode there. And essentially it's like a limiter and a compressor, I think, all in one. And so it can boost the signal of what you're working on a lot. As you can tell, it's probably a lot louder now. If I hit play on this, you'll hear. See, that's with it off. And then on. When you have more stuff going on, it's more apparent, maybe. Another thing, when I was recording that beat, you may have noticed that things didn't sound right at first, maybe. Anything you record when you're in one of these other screens, I guess I can go into the Zurich here. When you hit record, you'll see over in the bottom right, you'll see like undo appears and also redo. It's kind of nice because you can literally just leave this thing recording and looping, and try stuff out, and if it doesn't work, you just hit undo and it gets rid of everything you've just entered. And that works pretty well usually. Just be careful, because if you get a beat that you like and then you try to add some more to it, if you don't like the next additions that you've made and you hit undo, it's going to get rid of everything unless you go out of that screen and then back into it first. Then anything new that you add will not get removed when you hit undo. All right, so I'm going to go create a melody line now. One other thing to note before I do this, I'm playing on the Bluetooth keyboard obviously, but like with the Recife, all the synths, if you look at the bottom of the screen when I go back into it, you'll see there's a keyboard. You can actually play that right on your screen. So sometimes if I'm just sitting somewhere, I will work on beats without the keyboard. The keyboard just makes it easier. You can make everything right within this program. So I'll go back and show you what I mean. Also, when I go back in at the bottom left of where the keyboard is, you'll see scale. If you click on that, you can get some, you can choose the key that you want to play in, and you can choose some pre-existing scales. That's fun sometimes. What's nice about it is when you choose a scale, it makes only the notes that are correct for that scale appear on the keyboard. So you basically can't play a wrong note when you're in that mode. Now that only applies to the on-screen keyboard, obviously the one that you're playing, that, this the normal notes. So you'd have to know how to play within that scale or key. knobs here. If you look at the Wolfsburg channel, and this is true for all of the instrument channels, the left knob is your pan, so pan left, right. The second one is a send that exists already, and it is actually reverb. Let's see. I use it sometimes, and then again, you can do all these insert effects. I just added some phaser, but there's a lot of fun ones in here. There's some distortion, more like a bit crusher, just decimator here. But I use the phaser a lot, and the flanger, and the delay, and sometimes the reverb, so that I can be more selective with the reverb. Okay, so that'll be, I guess, the intro for now. You can add new scenes one of two ways. You can just hit the little plus button here that's right under scene 1. If you hit that, it creates scene 2. But usually the way I work is, because I'm going to be sort of adding on to stuff, I use the function here in the bottom left. I'm going to delete this channel because I don't need that, or that scene. And what I do is, if you look at scene 1, I'm going to hit the duplicate. And what that does when I go out of function is that it's literally duplicated it. Now you'll also note in the bottom of the screen, where the play controls are, you'll see that the green loop button is lit now. That means that if I just hit play, it's just going to loop this however many times it says it should, based off of this repeat setting here. So I'm going to actually up that to 2. So now when I play it, you'll see it's going to take longer to go through that. But if you want to go to your next scene, you have to turn off that loop button here in the bottom. So you'll see it goes to the next scene now. There you go. Alright, so I'm going to move on to the next part. Alright, so we got a beat, melody, and a bass line. And now I'm going to create another scene and make some variations and some other melodies. A lot of it's, you know, getting used to the instruments and the layout of this program, but to be honest, I found it pretty freaking intuitive. Now, granted, I've been using DAWs and I've been a musician for many years, so I mean, a lot of the concepts are not new to me. The workflow is pretty different from, say, Ableton, which is what I was mostly using before. But you know, a lot of the concepts are the same everywhere, so you know, just trial and error. I mean, you can't really mess anything up if you're just screwing around. Just create a new track and, you know, don't have any severe expectations of yourself. I'll add a couple more parts, but I probably need to wrap this up since I got to go back to work. other cool thing, actually one of the coolest things about this is that you can record automations. So any of the controls that you see, it works to some extent on this screen, but it's better when you're in an instrument. I'm going to go in and record one in a second over that Phoenix melody line I created, but anything that you record, I'm sorry, when you're in an instrument, aside from recording melody lines and stuff in real time, any of the changes that you make to the controls, so like, you know, say the cutoff filter or, you know, whatever, wave shape, anything, literally anything on the screen, you can record a real-time automation of that change, and it will just be part of the loop forever after. And you can do as many of those as you want. So, you know, it's pretty amazing. It's like if you are familiar with Korg Volcas, they have the motion sequence. It's like that, except for, you know, way more powerful because you can do it to your heart's content. All right, so I'm going to go record a quick one. So as you may have noticed, I basically recorded an automation of the cutoff filter opening up, and then I also recorded an automation of the vibrato going from 0 to 100 basically. You can, well, not in this screen because this is audio, but in the Midi screens for all the other instruments, you can click in the bottom of the drum roll editor, and it will allow you to actually adjust all the parameters via envelopes. So if you prefer to drag things, it can be kind of hard on a phone. I don't have super high expectations when I'm making stuff on the phone. I mean, I want to create some good ideas, and you can get some pretty amazing stuff right out the gate. But if you really want to edit this stuff more in detail, then I would suggest using an iPad or I guess a Mac. And also you can use, you know, I have a pretty basic Bluetooth keyboard, but they do make more fancy keyboards that will work with Gadget, and you can actually, you can assign the various knobs and faders from your fancier Midi controller to Gadget, and you can record stuff with more control when you have that kind of thing going on. I usually leave that kind of stuff for working in Ableton or whatever, working in a DAW. This is mostly just to get some ideas out, but the thing is Korg Gadget is so amazing and powerful that you can get some pretty damn good ideas out before you even bring it into the computer. Which I'll probably go ahead and wrap it up for now. This track ended up not being very extensive because I spent so much time explaining things, but I'm going to go ahead and save my work. You can do save as and all the normal stuff, but something to be aware of that's, to me, amazing, because I like GarageBand as well, but the problem with GarageBand is, I mean, first of all, the layout or the controls of GarageBand, although it can do a bunch of amazing stuff, I find it a little less intuitive to figure some of that stuff out. Gadget, to me, just, you know, is like a fish to water for some reason. GarageBand does not let you export your projects, to me, in a way that's easy to get into the computer and work on. Now, maybe if I was using some other software, possibly it would be. I just know that I've read stuff online that said that even GarageBand users that have the actual program on their Mac, it's not a one-to-one thing. If you're using it on your iPhone or iPad to get it into the actual DAW on the Mac. and it doesn't export in other formats, which is what I'm getting to with Korg Gadget. You can export in a number of different ways, but you can basically export directly to an Ableton Live project, and it will literally every single thing here, all the sounds and the scenes, it exports all of that, so that as soon as you import it and open it in Ableton, all your sounds are there, separated out, just like they would be, just like they are here on Gadget, and like you would probably work within Ableton to an extent. Obviously, the only difference is it's going to be rendered audio, so it's wave files. But you can export the MIDI data separately. As you see here, there's a standard MIDI file, and you can do it for Ableton as well. See, there's audio and MIDI. So there's some options here. You can export your full tracks, obviously, to various places too, like Dropbox and Audio Copy, etc. And that can be useful too if you're on the go. There's a lot more I can cover, and maybe I'll do some more videos if this one's well received. But that's essentially how I work. I work faster when I'm not trying to explain it, obviously. But Korg Gadget is the shit, in my opinion. I highly recommend it. It's, I probably, when I tell people that I work on music on my phone, they probably think that I'm just some dumbass, but and yeah, I am a dumbass actually, so that's fair, but not necessarily when it comes to using Korg Gadget and creating music. You can create some pretty complex stuff. In fact, before I completely go, I'll open another project and just show you something more complex. I'm trying to think, I don't know which one of these would be good. Like maybe this one. So this is another track I wrote a while back. It's not the most complex I've done, but it's got 7 tracks, 8 now because of the Zurich, and it's got about 14 scenes, I think, something like that. And I mean, it's the same kind of process. There's a lot of things I didn't go over, like the function button gives you a lot of control here. You can copy and paste to your heart's content. You can even copy the melody line from this track and put it on another track with a different instrument and stuff like that. There's just a ton you can do in this software and in this app, that is, and it's amazing. I highly recommend it. It's easy to just get some damn beats going, to be honest with you. All right, that's it for now. Talk to you later.